Welcome, I'm Johnny, and this is yet another Friday live stream. I'm so excited that we're slowly making a run. This is the third Friday in a row, and we're gonna keep it up. We've also done a long live stream on Monday when I was inspired over the weekend with fresh ideas, and we tried quite a few stuff together. We created a new Sveltekit app. This one should be much shorter. It's not gonna be 3 hours plus, maybe under an hour, maybe 30 minutes, we'll see. We're gonna import SVGs in Sveltekit because there are more efficient ways to do it than what I see out there, than what I knew before. So I want to fill people in on what's one efficient way that I found doing it. And of course, in the chat, please let me know, am I doing things wrong? Are there even better ways to do this? Always welcome. I always say that the best way to learn, or the fastest way to learn at least, is to be wrong on the internet. And if I'm wrong, let me know. I also just figured out, I had a revelation while I was setting up the live stream to record now, that most channels have like a screen for the stream is gonna start in a few minutes, which helps so you are not like deer in the headlights as you press the stream button, start broadcasting now, and then you go up and you're like, oh my god, am I live? Am I not? Goodness, what's happening? Maybe next time I'll be able to implement that. We have an intermission screen already I made if you want to see that one. But that's not as fun. We want something else. And the most fun thing always is my desktop, because that's where I do the code. That's where I have the agenda for the day. That's where the magic happens. And I will double check whether the stream is indeed going live. Seems like it is, so that's all good. The agenda for today is all about SVGs in the Sveltekit. So very front-end based. And I'm just realizing that I cannot see the chat with this setup, so I may need to do something else to manage that, because I would strongly dislike to not be able to see your lovely comments while doing this. So I will have to hide the chat overlay, sadly, from this lovely screen, and instead move this over here. And now we should be good to go. So back to the desktop. What we'll be doing today is importing SVGs in Sveltekit. Let's imagine that our design team has some brand new designs for our app. Let's imagine that we're searching for some icons ourselves. If we don't have a design team, I'll show you the tools that I sometimes use for my apps when I don't have a design team, when I'm not working with a client or a whole company. And we're gonna import them in Sveltekit. There are a few ways to do that. Svelte does support SVG elements, HTML elements, in any case, but we may be losing some optimisations that we'll do later. So what's the problems with just pasting in an SVG in a Svelte file? How we would be able to use SVGOMG to manually do the optimizations I'm talking about. Then we'll look into automating all of this with Vite plugin. Then we'll talk about TypeScript support. And then, as a bonus, some options that I like passing to this tool, the Vite plugin tool, the Popanator Sveltekit SVG for Vite. And then we may even talk animations, because I love animations. They're one of the most exciting things you can do in the front-end land. I hope this sounds good. So, what is the problem? What am I talking about? You'll see that we have this with Svelte app. It's a real app now, even though I should be updating the content that we've got a bit more. And it is using SVGs. So this big icon is an SVG, the YouTube and GitHub icons are SVGs. Even this theme toggler is an SVG that has a code animation. But I'm not importing them in the best way possible. And to start showcasing the problems, I will pretend that I'm a sole engineer that just wants a few more icons in their app. If you're quick in the chat, you may be able to tell me what to search and what to add. If not, then I'm gonna go with a heart icon or something, as I was doing before, as I was experimenting with things. So if you don't have a design team and you're just looking for some SVGs to add in your app, Google has the Material Icons project, which is also available as a font, but that has some accessibility concerns. I'd say this used to be the hack when Font Awesome, if you've heard of that one, was all the rage. But nowadays, I think it's not the best idea to ship a big font just because you want a couple of icons in your app. Still, you are able to use this and search for whichever icon you want, and feel free to tell me in the chat which icon I should add. You can always change this later. You can pick the one you want, then even tweak it, make it a bit thinner, make it have an outline only look or be filled in, and quite a few other things. And you can download the SVG by clicking the button here. However, there is also another way to go about it, which is if you do have a design team or if you're familiar with Figma yourself, you can go in there and you can export any component or whatever you want as an SVG. And if it is created in that way and no hacky designer has embedded an image there, then you'll get a fully performant SVG that you can play around with the paths and colors and all of that. Maybe before going into the meat of things, I will explain quickly what are SVGs. SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. So what you do in Photoshop, and when you take a picture, you take a raster image. That pretty much has information that says this pixel should be red, this pixel should be blue. With Scalable Vector Graphics, you pretty much have only mathematical information that says there's going to be a line, it's going to go for this much, and that allows the computer to scale it to infinity, to scale it as much as possible. When it's a raster image, you cannot blow it up like it happens in CSI style shows where they press the enhance button and then they just blow up and magnify the image without problems. But with scalable vector graphics, you can actually do that to infinity. And I'm actually a bit better with designing scalable vector graphics. Maybe because I kind of like math. That's by the by though. That's often why they are preferred for the web, with less information, with the instructions of I want these 4 lines on the screen. You can have something that scales across all your viewports. It scales to look great on your phone. With a retina display, it scales on your huge display you have plugged in, your huge monitor. Your TV screen can scale to anything without needing a 30 megapixel image, without needing to ship that to your users. So that's all about SVGs. They also allow for some cool tricks you cannot do to an image, but we'll see them in just a moment. So we said that we downloaded this file, this heart. We can even rename it to heart. And I've got this with Svelte project. And we can imagine we have an icons folder, which we'll reveal in the Finder. And I'll drop the downloaded image there. That'd be the same if I had downloaded this image from Figma or wherever else. So I've got the heart SVG here. You can see that it has some information on height, width. It says that, oh, it has a path and these are the coordinates it's traveling through. So that's the mathematics part that I was talking about. But how do I go about showing it on the screen? I know that this page is using the hero component. So at the top of the hero component, even above the build apps thing, I'll import the heart there. Later in the video, we may replace all of these other icons to work like we're gonna make this work now, but for now, just for demo purposes, let's try to import that hard SVG. And you can see that we're importing a couple other components, build link and the build component here. So how about we try import heart from $lib, which SvelteKit ensures gets us into this folder, icons, and then let's get this heart SVG. What will happen if I try to render that? So by default, we'll see this string on our screen. And is this Vite trolling us? Probably. Vite is the bundler that SvelteKit is using behind the scenes to transform Svelte code, JavaScript code, HTML, whatever else we have, into the final HTML and JavaScript that the browser is gonna execute. However, it doesn't really know what to do with SVG files. It has a very basic mapping to say, when you import an SVG file, just give me the path as a string. So this is the relative path from the root of the project that Vite is giving me here. However, that's not what I want. What I want is a heart on the screen. So how do we do that? Well, one way to do that is, one of the reasons that I really like Svelte actually, is that it really looks like HTML when you do templating. It looks like HTML very, very often. And that means you can use things like SVG and path and stroke and any other tag that you may want to use. So let's create a heart.svelte component and copy our SVG, just paste it here and save. And this may look a bit funky with a prettier formatting. I don't know why it does it, just know that it is a bit annoying. But that is by the by. If we import heart uppercase, because it's a component, from heart.svelte, and we try to render it as a Svelte component, so heart slash, then you can see that the heart is in there. And if I magnify, you can see it kind of magnifies nicely. It doesn't get the blurry pixelated look because it is an SVG. But still, that's not quite what I want. That's one of the problems of doing it this way. So what I want is this heart to be a different color, and I want it to be bigger. And just rendering the heart is fine if I copy the SVG that I downloaded from the internet and paste it into a .svelte file to turn it into a Svelte component. But if I want to make it bigger, now I either need to update these directly, and still it won't quite work because it doesn't really know how to scale this, because the path is still set with a specific set of coordinates. What's a bit easier to do is that we can specify the fill, hope it's a fill, and say that the fill should be red. And that would make the heart a bit more visible. However, what if, for example, I want two hearts in there and I want one of them to be transparent or gray or whichever else color, and this heart to be a different color? Well, in that case, I would need to start complicating things in the previously simple Svelte component. So I'd need to open a script tag, and I do TypeScript for these things, and explicitly say that, oh, this takes in a fill, which by default is maybe current color. And then I can use this fill here, and Prettier will format this nicely for me. And therefore here I can say that I do want this fill to be red, but I want this fill to be green. But what if there was a stroke in this picture? What if we want to pass a class? That wouldn't work because, again, we'd need to define explicitly that we want to export the class property, but then we'd have problems because JavaScript has a class with the class variable. Class is what you use to say, I used to do Java. I could keep going with this joke, but I will bail out quickly. The point is that class is a reserved keyword. You can't use it as a variable name. So then you go with class name, and then you understand why React went with that thing. But here in the templating, you can actually use a class because this is not a variable or reference or anything. This is just a property that SVGs and any element can have, and you can pass around the class name like so. And then you can put in your Tailwind classes to your heart's content. But that's not good enough. That's too much manual work, because then if you are working with a designer, they will change their minds. They'll say, oh, I want these lines to be more simplified. Maybe you yourself will go into your tool and say, oh, let's try it with like the light width thingies. And then you download this file, and then you go back and you don't remember what you've done, or you have to do it again. So why repeat yourself that much? To fix these issues that we had, that I want to make this bigger, but I quite cannot, there is a tool called SVGO that we will use with our Vite plugin later as well, but it has some UI. So if you don't want to set anything up, if you don't want to change the way SvelteKit works with Vite and all of that, you may actually just use this tool called SVGOMG, the missing UI for your SVGO, which is a wonderful tool. Both of these are wonderful tools. And what we can do here is we can copy our SVG, we can paste the markup here, and then it will generate some prettified markup for us to use in our SvelteKit file, and do a few changes according to the options that I've selected here, and these are options I like. So instead of a hard-coded width and height, now it is defining a view box. And what this means is that it's easier to handle the, the size of the SVG. So now it knows that these coordinates for the path are supposed to be bound in a 48 by 48 square, so it can extrapolate and make it as big as I want it to be. But, well, there is no but there. We need to remember to, yet again, use the fill variable to make this have the color that we want, because I pasted something from the internet and then I needed to do the things I forgot. Which, let's say, does include passing in the class name just to show off how we could make this bigger or smaller by changing this. So let's pass a Tailwind class. So let's have a small heart here. And let's have a slightly bigger heart here. Oops. Class name again. And instead of specifying the fill like this, we can specify it with a Tailwind class, which means it's a bit easier to do things like changing the color as we hover over this. We can even apply transition colors, and then it smoothly will change here. So you can still do cool things. You can easily style your SVGs in your SvelteKit app if you are willing to download whatever SVG asset you want, paste it into the SVGOMG tool, and then remember to export all the variables that you may want to be exporting. And then you are able to use all the things that you want as you render your SVG in different ways in different places. However, what if I told you that there is a way to automate this? There is a way to just say to Vite or just say to Svelte, whatever you want to call it, I want you to import this SVG file and I want it to be a Svelte component like this, without me needing to do all of this boilerplate. And hopefully that's exciting, because that's exactly what we're gonna do next. So in theory, in the agenda, we pasted in a plain Svelte file. I explained why that may not be the thing that you want to do. I showed off this SVGOMG tool, which is amazing. I love it. And finally, we're gonna automate all of this with a Svelte plugin using this Svelte plugin by Popanator called sveltekit-svg. So every SvelteKit project has a Svelte config, and this is where it actually keeps the Vite config options. SvelteKit has its own Vite config options, so this key may not exist, but if you do have this key, or if you do add this key, then it's gonna merge whatever options you pass in here. No problem. So what I've done in this app already is added a Markdown plugin, which allows the blog functionality to work. This is a Markdown file that gets parsed by Vite, thanks to this plugin. I've added a configuration for my tests in Vitest. There's a video on that if you'd like to have a quick look. These streams are supposed to be chill. They're not really supposed to be lessons. We're figuring stuff out together. The format is much slower. The videos, I think, are a great way, if I may say so myself, to learn and assimilate any concept. I don't have that many videos. However, I do think they're quick, to the point, helps you go through quite a few stuff relatively quickly. And if it's too quick, then maybe you can watch it again. That would help the channel too. Or you can set up the speed to be slightly slower. They're definitely faster than how I talk here, and they have very much fewer ums and all of that. I'm trying to get better though. We're only 4 live streams in, so we'll make it work. One day I'll be able to look at the camera better as well. Anyway, what we want is to add another plugin here. We want the SVG plugin that Popanator has created. So first thing, let's install it. Let's go to our terminal and npmi dev dependency Popanator. It's a dev dependency because it happens at build time and at development time, I suppose. It's in, and now all we need is to add this. So import all that stuff from Popanator, import the library, and then instead of doing it inline, we can say SVG plugin equals SVG, and we can start by calling it with no options and see what happens there. And then I don't think the ordering will matter for this sort of plugin. Let's just put it in first. And then, once this crashes dramatically, I'm gonna go back to the terminal, restart the server. Oh no. Let's see if the AI command search remembers the thing that I don't want to remember ever again. Probably not. All right, warp, try better. The LSOF 3000 sounds correct. but the rest didn't. Right, we managed to kill this and restart it. So the server is back up. Svelte is great at reloading when you change many things, but I do find that sometimes when you change the Svelte config itself, you do need a hard restart. So we've got the SVG plugin in. What happens if I try to import the heart from the heart file? Let's not worry about class names and all of that. Well, you'll see what happens is that it actually gets imported. Oops. The casing might bite us at some point. Did we get a warning for that? Hopefully not. So you can see we have two hearts here, but they're not anymore the heart Svelte component. In fact, we can delete it safely. We're just importing this heart SVG. All we did was paste it, drag and drop it in this icons directory. So no extra work from us. Vite, thanks to this plugin, has managed to turn this into a Svelte component. Now, do we still have the problem of being able to pass variables here? So if I wanted to make the field red, you'll see that I'm able to do it, but the problem is that TypeScript doesn't understand what is happening. Because as far as Vite is concerned, importing .svg files returns in a string, which is their relative path, as we saw earlier. So we need to enhance TypeScript to explain to TypeScript, actually now we have a plugin that makes this be a Svelte component. And there are instructions how to do this here. However, I find they're not good enough. Let's try to paste them and see what happens. Let's do it exactly as the creator suggests. And this is common practice. Let's create a global.d.ds. .d is for TypeScript definition. Let's paste all of this in. And for our tsconfig, we probably don't need to do anything else because the .sveltekit config does say that it will include any .ts file so long as it's in the source directory, which is where we've put this. So if we go back to our hero, then we should see that this becomes any if things worked like the repo suggests. However, still the Vite declaration where if you import an SVG, it's string, takes precedence, and that's quite sad. The other thing that is suggested there is that you can say that this is a component specifically, which makes it look at this definition, so this definition wins. However, I have found that this makes Vite's tests bail, so I don't know if it will actually make the ones that I have here bail because I don't have a Vite's test for this. But keep in mind that this has made my Vite's tests work, and just in general, I don't want to import things with question mark component or anything like that. I just want to import heart from this, get the SVG, and move on with my day. So I want this definition to win, and I'd also appreciate it if this wasn't any. So even when component wins, I don't want this to be any. I want it to be a Svelte component, and there is a way to do it, if you can believe that, and just to avoid making things up. I'll just need to double check this. Because I think Svelte does export a Svelte component type. However, I think that's not what we need. I think what we need is Svelte component dev. I think that's correct. So now, if I actually add it to the correct block, this knows that it's a Svelte component and it will have a few extra features, like you'll be able to add like on-click handlers, that sort of thing. It should be able to do a bit better. Anyway, a bit better than just saying that this is any. You should be able to add a few more properties with a bit more safety here. But the question remains, how do we make this type definition win the declaration war without using the question mark component hack? Well, what I found works, and let me know if you have a better way to do it, is if I know that I'll put all of my icons inside a source lib icons directory, I can specify, let's specify another one, that source lib, or I guess $lib, $lib icons dot anything dot svg. These are the Svelte components. And now it's happy again. And if I command click, it gets to this definition that is more specific, so it wins the declaration war. This isn't ideal because sometimes you want to collocate your icons to your components. You don't want to have every icon in this directory necessarily, but it's good enough for me. It's good enough for the purposes of this app. So it is going to be what we're going with for now. So I mentioned before that I would like to be able to pass classes here, which I can. So if I do fill red, it will work the same as directly passing, maybe not. If I do fill primary 400, so a class that does exist. Maybe not. It's class. It's class, of course. So fill primary 400. So I can pass a class here like every other component. I was doing a bit of React earlier, so I kind of forgot. So I can do this. But how do I make this take a bigger size easily? How do I give it how can I specify the width of this? And if you remember, the way we did that was by going into the SVGOMG UI and pasting this to the Svelte component. And if we paste the same thing into the regular component, then you may need to restart the server because maybe it doesn't know that you've changed this thing. But it should work. So we will try it again. Start the server. So you can see now that it's as big as the container is, and we can make this be W16 and fill copy base. Doesn't look different enough, but hey, it works with the theme as well. That's pretty cool. But in any case, the point is that the way this works is by removing the hard-coded width and height that we had before. Height and width. This is a way that many designers design their SVGs, and the SVG we get from material icons also has specified width and height. However, that's something I do not like. I prefer when it has a view box, because then it just knows where the SVG instructions, all these coordinates are contained, and then you're free to specify the width outside of the component and more easily scale it. So ideally, I don't want these to have width and height, I want them to have view box. But I don't want to manually go again into the SVG OMG thing, paste in the icon I downloaded. I want this to happen automatically. And we can achieve that by passing in some options into the Vite plugin for SVGs. As you can see, we can pass in a few options, including SVGO options. SVGO is the behind the scenes tool that is doing most of the magic. So this plugin is doing the let's turn this into a Svelte component magic, but it is using SVGO, which is an amazing tool that has existed for a long time, which can minify, make the SVGs you have smaller. It can replace some attributes, so you can figure out what the viewbox is depending on your width and height. It can add titles. It can do lots and lots of things. It is this project that I will also link in the description as well. It can take many options. It can have many plugins itself. But what we'll do now is pass it the one I really care about, the one about substituting the width and height automatically. So how do we do that? If you remember, we went to the Svelte config and we initialized the plugin with no options, but actually we want to pass a few options. That hopefully makes sense. And I will need to refresh my memory on what the options are. We do know that it is SVG options, but it's not as simple as passing I want this to remove the viewbox. Apparently, this is a specific plugin that you should add. You should have SVGO pass. The preset default plugin. So add the preset default plugin, which does a lot of sensible things that result in a more minified, a smaller file size. Hey Albert, hello again. But it does the one thing that I don't like, which is width height related. What I actually want is the opposite, is to remove the viewbox option to be false. By default, this is true. So we need to pass the param to this preset default SVGO plugin to override remove viewbox to be false. And then this will allow us to do the opposite thing. So after the plugin, you can say that I want to remove dimensions. So I want to use the remove dimensions plugin. So if we've overridden the remove the viewbox, it does not remove the viewbox. Conversely, it removes the dimensions. It will remove the width and height and try to figure out a viewbox for you. So if we add this as our config, and we can see that this has width and height. If I restart the server again, you'll see that this works and I can actually manipulate the height, the width and height. By adding a few classes, they will fill in their container by default because they have the viewbox instruction, and then they'll scale up the viewbox. They'll scale up the icon accordingly, according to their container. It's hard to demo, I'm realizing now, because I do need to restart the server and it's a different file. But hopefully you get the idea. So width and height does exist. Let's try it one more time. So if we're saying remove viewbox true, which is not an override, it's what happens by default, this cannot be controlled as easily as before. But if I say remove viewbox false and remove dimensions, then I can control this more easily with the classes as I've shown. It happened to work this time. Great. I assume because I've already initialized the SVGO plugin, it didn't really need an override, restart of the server, but who knows, maybe I just lucked out. So with that said, we automated with a Vite plugin. We talked about TypeScript support. We talked about the option that I like. You can go to SVGO and see whatever options they have. They have options about adding titles. Another one that may be cool is that you can tell SVGO that whenever you find a specific color, so whenever you find like FFF, for example, you can translate this to current color. which will make it use the color for the text essentially. And this is useful because many designers design this with like the brand colors in mind. So they'll put in a brand color. I don't know if this is a valid color or anything, but you don't want that usually for your icons. What you want is to be able to define the colors. So you'll have them like this in different places in your app. And you'll be able to more easily affect what happens when you hover over them, for example, as it happens in these components up there, which looks much cooler than just having a hard-coded color. So an option you may pass is related to that, using current color more. And maybe we can talk about animations as well. So there are one of the most famous videos that I've done actually is the hamburger menu video, which I don't remember where I've deployed. We may need to do the old Google search. Oops, not my video, sorry. Didn't want to blind you with double Johnny, that's a bit too much. So this app has like a huge hamburger menu. It has an SVG animation, and that's achieved by some Svelte controlling magic, which I do find is a very efficient way to do animations. The browsers can render it well, and everyone gets a fun experience if they're motion safe. Anyway, that tangent gone, there are actually a few Tailwind classes for simple animations we may want to see. So SVG animations, quite cool, but you can have an icon and make it spin like this just by adding a class, which is quite fun. So maybe let's have a look. Let's have the last heart ping. Is animation actually ping? Am I making it up? It's animate ping. It's pretty cool. You can stack this together and then have a like effect, something like that. I think that'd be fun. But I think that's the end of the lesson for now. I can wait for any comments, any questions, any things to discuss while I'm actually replacing some of the icons that we have there with .svgs, because that's the way to go. Maybe have a look at the theme toggle. I guess that's the thing that has the most impressive animation, because I used a YouTube tutorial from Query Challenges. Adam makes amazing videos there, so that's probably the best looking animation in this demo app, but that's by the by. And it is mixing, so this may be a case where a Svelte component does make sense, because it does have all the SVG template in here, which we may have a regular .svg and import it and rendering there, but because it has so many styles defined, and it does have a bit of maybe state management would be too far to call it, maybe this one doesn't make sense to change into a .svg. Maybe this is good enough, because you have the class definitions there, you have the class names, and then you can easily go in the styles and see, oh, the moon class does this, blah, blah, blah. If it was in a different file, then you'd need to open the other file and see what happens. However, no excuse for the question mark or the YouTube icon to be Svelte components. Let's change those. So I actually have them as components icons. I can move them here and say, hey, this, instead of defining classes here and defining them poorly as well, say github.svg, so none of this, no need to manually pass the class, Save. And YouTube SVG, hey YouTube. We don't really need to pass the title. I think that's an option that we could make work with the SVGO as well. So this becomes youtube.svg. Ugh, YouTube, U-tube sounds so wrong. I'll keep it like this. I am used to having like icon assets be kebab cased because the users may see them, but everything else is camel cased or studly cased. So we've changed these two. I want to search for icon. So in the footer, it seems we have a YouTube icon. I actually want to get it from lib icons YouTube. SVG. That's a real thing. And see, I do have, do I not? That's interesting to know that I must ensure to spell this correctly. There are other processes that I've automated in other places or other people have automated for me to explicitly create definition files for the SVGs you've had. But maybe that's overkill for this app. It'd be nice to have, though, for sure. And let's change the variable name here. Change it again, because here we can change the casing as much as we want. And we also want this to be in magic lib. So the footer should look the same, but it doesn't. So question is, what did we mess up this time? We'll figure it out. Lib icons.svg. Thinks it's this, but it isn't. Ah, of course, now instead of the class name that's very Reacty, class. That's all we needed. The transitions still work. Perfect, and no confusing class name or class. Everywhere in the app will be class now. And I think we had some references to icons here. Reason to remove the title. Still works? Question mark. How did I make that one? It's this. It's question mark one word or two. That's what I want to know. Back to profile. All good. The only thing that should be remaining is this huge build thingy. Soon be called build. And that's a case where it does have quite a few different fields. So it may need a bit of extra thinking to figure out which ones you would want to be current color or which ones you would want to be controlled by fill. The way that the place that I've gotten this is Andro. It's an amazing resource for very great looking SVGs. You can modify your brand color here, change it up, pick something nice, and then download what you want, and you get something that looks like this. That's by the by. No class, no export. Just do this. And the hero, build file. The hero icon. Did change the name before refactoring this. Cool, so it looks the same, but it's a bit easier to change. This is a good case of if I go into this app and decide, hey, I'm gonna change the main icon we have in the app. I'm gonna download this one. I don't need to go through all these steps of pasting in a Svelte component. I can just paste it in here, replace the icons that I have here, can even automate this if that's linked to something in Figma, and then move on with my life. So I think this is gonna be it. Final call for questions, maybe penultimate call for questions, because I am gonna show the Figma flow just for the fun of it. So no more hearts. This is Figma. I'm gonna export this as heart, thick. Is it just me, or is this heart looking kind of thick? I don't know if you watch the Danny videos, where he's an amazing genius engineer that makes games in Unity. But that's what this non-sequitur is referring to. So let's drop this in. See the process again. So I download from Figma, I paste it into my icons directory right here, and then I can import from lib icons thick SVG and render it right here. Not bad. You could do fancier stuff by drawing this, I suppose. Let's see, what does this actually consist of? It's a path. Interesting. Svelte itself has some nice transitions. They have draw transition. Svelte draw. So if your icons are full of paths or draws, or you can create your own custom method, but Svelte does sip with this draw transition that looks quite cool. May get annoying if it's something that you do or the users do every time, but they're always very fancy to look at. So maybe a success message, or maybe a placeholder for when your inbox is empty, when you don't have any invoices, something like that. I think that'd be cool. And that's easy to do if you've set up this Svelte plugin, this Vite plugin for turning .svgs into Svelte components. Thank you very much. All right, let's go back to the face. And I'm gonna ask the chat one final time. If you have any questions, let me know. I will be putting up a poll to get the pulse of what we will want to work on next Friday. I don't know if it's going to be a shorter one, under an hour like this, or a longer one, but probably a shorter one for a while. I hope you have lovely evenings. You have videos to look forward to. We did the endpoint prep, and I'm going to be shooting and editing this very, very soon. So I'm excited to get that one out. I think it's going to be a good one. But that's it for today. Thanks advance for watching. I'm not gonna say my catchphrase yet, because I do like the way this pulses. So I'm gonna end like this and say, hit the button right after saying, thanks advance for watching. I'll see you around.